Hey Madhav. Hi Vasim. Nice to see you. Hey Shiva. Hi Akash. Hi Tejal. Nice. People are turning. Hey Vivek. So Vivek, where are you a student at? You can probably unmute yourself here. Then you say hi Sanjay Chaturvedi. Hey Ramandeep. So wherever possible, if you can switch on your cameras, that's great. So we get to see each other. So somebody has to unmute Vivek. So
Yeah,
there you
hi
go.
sir.
Hi.
Good evening.
Yeah. So where are you from?
Sir, I am from Bihar, Patna.
Okay.
Currently in Hyderabad.
Okay. And you're doing mechanical engineering in Hyderabad?
No, sir, I am doing masters in design from IIT Hyderabad.
Ah, okay. All right. Because you said fourth year BTech mechanical engineering, so I was curious.
It's
Cool.
just
Awesome.
about my degree from the BTech college.
Got it. Well, welcome to the club, Vivek.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Hi, Devinder. Hi, Kranti. So let's get some more cameras on before we can get started. Hi, Nidhi. Hi, Pooja. So quick question. How many of you have attended the previous session that I did? The same one, design patterns wala. Anybody?
Hi Prasad, this is Kishore. First time I'm here.
Hi, Kishore.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, welcome to the club.
Thank you. I've been there last month. Since. Thank you.
Nice. Hey, Abhishek. Hi, Kranti. So, Kranti, you wanted to say something? Do you need to unmute yourself for something, Kranti?
I have attended the previous one.
Okay, you've attended the previous one. All right, good. So, hi, Muskan. Okay, so we are getting some more cameras on. So, hi, Ishita. So, okay, so what is happening is the way I have done this workshop is it's got multiple layers to it. For those of you that are attending this for the first time, I want you to understand the mechanical concepts of design patterns and how to scale up design. Okay. This is again what I call one of those fundamental skills that any designer needs to have in their sleep. Okay. Now, for those of you that have attended this already, okay, we are going to focus on the mindset of scalable design. Okay, the design pattern mindset. So, which is very different from the mechanics of design patterns itself. Okay, so if anybody's attended, please make sure that you are flagging me and you're letting me know so I know that I can work with you on the mindset concepts. For those of you that are attending the first time, that's fine. Just enjoy the concept itself. Don't worry about the mindset because the mindset will come over time. Okay, so the other thing is I believe we are making this live on LinkedIn. So go ahead, let's get that live so that we can get started.
Sure.
Awesome. So welcome all the folks on LinkedIn as well. Today we are going to be talking about design patterns and how to use them to scale up our design. And this is a fundamental skill that any designer would need to know. And we're going to cover these elements over the next 3 days. And for those of you that have attended this class before, I want to make sure that you understand there's a second track for you, which is focusing on the mindset of thinking at a design pattern level. So we will cover that with you as well. So if you've attended this before, send a message to Rajiv, and then we will have a special sets of homeworks for you as well. Okay, that said, let's get going. And I believe we have a nice grouping here. Okay, so creating scalable UX products. So there's a interesting statement, but I just want to ask people, and you could probably just raise your hand and talk. But what do you think is the difference between let's say, a graphic designer and a UX designer? Just from both of them, let's say, or a visual designer who's doing UX work, right? So how would you differentiate the work or the artifacts that both of them generate? Anybody want to talk about that? Okay, go ahead, Ishita.
I believe graphic design means UX designer having taking any decision based on some logical reasoning behind it. But graphic designing is something I'm not saying it's not being reasonable, but the concept is not coming mainly from the user side. So user experience designers concerned more about the business users and also the team he or she may be working with.
Okay, so let me narrow down the scope a little bit. So let's not think about all user UX functionalities. Let's say it's a graphic designer and a visual designer. Okay, so both of them are creating a visual artifact. Okay, so what would be the difference be in terms of how the visual designer is creating a visual artifact as opposed to a graphic designer creating a visual artifact? Go ahead, Ishita.
As per my understanding, I think user experience designer, it's more solution and problem oriented, and visual designing is something like around the colors and fonts and other patterns. It's kind of
But
that.
even a graphic designer, I could argue is, and I'm just arguing because I want to make sure that everybody kind of understands the distinction that I'm making. Because even a graphic designer is solving a problem. So if you have to create a business card, they're solving a problem. There's a form factor associated. There's colors, visibility, what are you communicating? Those same problems are being communicated. So even a graphic designer is solving a problem, and a visual designer is also solving a problem. The hint is they're solving different problems. So what are the problems that they're solving? So I can understand it's business problem, but break it down a little bit. Like, how does it mean business problem? What exactly are they doing when they're creating a visual? So go ahead, Madhav. You want to go next? Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I think for a UX designer, it's more on how does it work, and for a visual designer, how does it look?
Interesting. So the UX designer is thinking about how will it work, and then the visual design. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah.
One is looking at how it works. The other is looking at how it looks.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna simplify it a little bit, but I think I'm going to take the mystery away because the question is a little bit too broad. It backfired. But fundamentally, what is happening is when a graphic designer is designing an artifact, they're creating a business card, or they're creating a poster, or they're creating, let's say, a banner or whatever it is. It's a one-off document. They're not thinking about how the business card is going to interact with the poster, is going to interact with the banner. Right? For them, each of those are individual elements. Whereas when a UX designer is solving the problem, when you create 4 or 5 or 6, 10, 100 pages or whatever, all of them have to be related. And you are also thinking, because when you write code, somebody has to code it. Somebody has to create libraries. And so the UX designer is not just thinking, so when a graphic designer is thinking about, they're just looking at the life of that product. Okay, I've created this business card. When your cards are over, we're going to create a new product. You're going to redesign it. Now, when a UX designer is thinking or a visual designer is thinking about it, they can't do that, because if they create a page, they don't know how many pages will end up in the product. You might have thousands of pages. You have no idea. Okay. And you also do not know how many new widgets you have to create. Okay. So when you start your work, you really have no idea where all your work is going to go and happen.
Right.
And so in a way, what happens is one of the fundamental skills that a UX designer has to build in when they're thinking about artifacts is not just think about artifact in isolation, but rather what is going to happen to the standard that they've created and how will it scale up when you have a product that's 1,000 pages, 10,000 pages. The other thing is, how does it scale up from an engineering perspective? Because if you've created a product and engineering is basically going to use it, and the different specification, different pages, you have to write extra code for every page. And every time you write extra code, think about where you consume most of this content. It's on your mobile, right? Even if you have to execute a single line of extra code per page, you're using extra battery that would not have been used before, right? You're slowing down the experience. It's going to take more time to load because it's loading over telecommunication networks, which may or may not be reliable. And so your loading times will increase or they'll get affected. So in that sense, you're also not just thinking about your visual artifact in terms of, okay, what is going to happen with everybody else? It's also going to be like, how does it deploy? Right? How is it going to be used on the client machine? What are the implications of that? Those are all things that a UX designer has to think about. Right? And so that is fundamentally what I would say is the UX approach as opposed to a non-UX approach. Right? At least when you're doing scalable design products in that context. Right? So with that said, that is what we are going to be covering over the next 3 days. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So quickly, I want to give a quick introduction because we have quite a few new faces in here. So I want to talk about who we are as College. So we're an industry consortium. So our goal is to identify, mentor, and recruit rockstar design talent. That's why we do this every month, or you see a lot of our posts out there, because we are constantly looking out for new people and we are picking them up. We are having these conversations, and our partner companies are getting access to this talent. So we are subsidized to a large extent by these groups of companies. And of course, the side effect of that we say is like, as we are doing that for companies, we are also building a strong and vibrant community for all of you. So you can come in, have those conversations, you need help, support, engagement. This is where the opportunity is. And not just that, it's also about learning what the state of art industry best practices are, because for a lot of us, it's important to see what somebody else is doing. So it expands the scope of our thought process as well. So that is what the vision and goal of College is. So let's go on to the next slide. So rules and guidelines, again, this is a 3-day workshop. There will be homeworks and assignments at the end of it. And for us, it is important because not only are we looking, if we have to identify talent, we have to find ways that we can evaluate people, who's good, who's not good, who understands, who doesn't understand, and that's where it is. So we give homeworks, and we actually, and one of my philosophies personally is, when you come into the class and you leave the class, you should feel richer. And, whether whether you're ready for a job or not is a different issue, but you should be smarter when you leave the class. So my personal philosophy is, if you have a question, I will make sure it is answered. Okay. So that said, it's a safe environment. So whatever question you ask, there's no, bad question or good question. We do not judge. Our intention is to help you grow in your career, whether it's with our partner companies or outside of those partner companies, does not matter. It's a safe environment. We are here to help you. Okay. What I would really love and want to see is, I want to see you participate and contribute actively, because when you're quiet, you're just waiting for somebody else to say something because you don't want to take a risk. The point is, when you take a risk, that's how you realize whether you're right or wrong. Okay, so do not worry about what somebody else will think, because we have a whole spectrum of people. Majority of our folks here are people with 1 to 3 years of experience. We also have people who are recent college graduates or even studying in college. So it's not a big deal, whatever it is, just speak it out and we will go from there. All right. Be kind and courteous to everybody, respect privacy for people. There are boundaries. So there's a Discord group. that I'd encourage you to join, have discussions, talk there. If you want to connect to people on LinkedIn, be kind and courteous, send them a message. Don't just say invite, send them a message. Hey, I'm so-and-so, this is my background. I saw you here. I would love to connect with you to kind of grow whatever your mutual interest, and send 2 or 3 lines so the other person knows who you are and you're connecting on a meaningful basis. Okay. If you just say connect and you never talk to each other, then what's the point of having that connection? Next one is keep your cameras on to ensure the best engagement, because again, we are all doing it remotely. The more I get to see you and the more you get to see me, we kind of build a connection, we build a rapport, and then we can discuss about things that are important to all of us. Okay. And lastly, if you believe that the workshop is valuable, please help us spread the word. We're going to talk about this at least at the end of this session. But help us spread the word, get more people, because the more motivated and interested people get into the community, the more the nature of networking and the discussions that happen, the better the discussions that happen here. Okay. And it is fairly common in this group where if somebody is struggling, they go out and say, I'm struggling. You build up a relationship with somebody, people will help you. Okay, it's a very common thing. We've also had situations where somebody's looking for a job, other people have gone out and helped them get jobs, because a lot of us are working professionals and all of our companies are hiring and recruiting. So this is also a great opportunity for, investing in each other and knowing each other, so, we can help each other. So that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind. And these things have happened in the past and they continue to happen even as we speak. So let's go on to the next slide. All right. So when you think about why do we need a design pattern, as I said earlier, it is to basically establish a consistent and effective design framework across a product. Okay. So the thing is, how many different calendar widgets can you have? Now, when you look at badly designed products, literally you go in there, you will see some of these products will have like 5, 6, 7 different types of calendar widgets. That means somebody has to code them. Somebody has to basically decide which calendar widget goes in where. And so it becomes a lot more complex. So what design patterns do is it's about enabling a consistent design framework. Okay. It's also about speeding up the coding and engineering, because if you have one type of calendar, somebody's already written it, you just have to copy and paste it. It basically gets done. Okay. So the next one is to basically improve multidisciplinary communication and discussions, because when you say calendar, everybody else imagines the same thing. And so when you talk to a product manager, when you talk to an engineer, everybody imagines the same stuff. Or you talk to your business leaders as well. It's the same communication that happens because everybody is grounded in the same way of thinking. Okay. And finally, and probably most importantly, is to build products that are easily learnable by users. Okay, so people can learn them, because if you've created a design pattern, people know how to use, let us say, your date of birth widget, or they know how to use change the volume of a certain product or whatever. I want to buy more products, less products, or whatever. You've created a widget. Now, once people learn how to do that, they do it all across your product. So they're not struggling anywhere else on any other page if you're consistent and standardized. And so that's the idea at a very simple level, at a mechanical level. That's why you do a design pattern. A design pattern is just simply something like, you say, this is what my calendar widget is going to look like. These are the colors I'm going to implement on my page. And this color will be used in this case. This color will be used in this case. And so you're standardizing everything. So that's what design patterns are at a very high level. Okay. Now that brings us to the next question. What is a design pattern mindset? Okay, so can anybody take a guess on what is the difference between a design pattern and a design pattern mindset? Go ahead, Pooja. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
I think you need to unmute yourself. Can you click on it? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes.
So I think a design pattern mindset is explain. We need to have an explanation about why particular color we are using and for what, and there has to be an explanation about it. I mean, or why we are using particular set of icons or likewise?
Not really. Not really. Because that is part of the design patterns. So when you create a design pattern, you have to have all that logic in place.
Okay.
Okay. But there's a mindset. Mindset is much bigger. It affects everything else that you do. Okay. So Madhav, you want to go next? You want to take a guess at what a design pattern mindset is? You're on mute.
I tried to unmute, but it said host. Yeah.
No, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
I think the mindset here is that all the three departments of development, design, and engineering who have a similar single thought that this is how our design should be. Maybe that's the right thing which I think.
It's kind of there, right?
Yes.
So it's very close. And I think that is what is a larger concept. So the design patterns are you as a designer are working by yourself. You're defining the standards and you're giving it to everybody.
Right.
Okay? The mindset is when you want to become a leader in the organization, you're training everybody that is working with you in a similar way of thinking.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So imagine if you're working with 5 designers and you have to launch a product together. Now, if everybody's in the same mindset, they know how to work with each other, right? How do you create a new pattern? How do you put it in there? How do you check it out? If you want to make modification to that pattern, how should that work? If somebody gives you a new pattern, how do you react? What are the processes? What are the thought, how do you execute? That is the mindset component of it. Okay. So the mindset is governing a system, is managing a system. That's what I call as a lead or a senior manager kind of a role. You're managing the process. Okay. Doing the design pattern is an individual contributor's job.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And so that is what is the core difference between a mindset as well. So eventually you will do design patterns, but at some point you will have to learn to manage the process of design patterns.
So is it kind of influencing to a better way of design?
It's a way of managing a team, because if everybody has their own design patterns and you're all doing your own stuff, yes, in theory, everybody has design patterns. The company is implementing design patterns, but the problem is the solution is not reached, isn't it? Because everybody has got their own versions.
Right.
So design pattern mindset is the person who's actually governing that process and saying, okay, this is how it needs to be done in an organization.
Understood.
Okay, so that's one variation of it. So let's go back. So thank you very much, Madhav. Good, it's a good ballpark. Awesome. So that is what the difference is, right? So the first one, when you look at it, just an image, but when you look at a design pattern and you start looking at it, you start realizing there are similarities and how do you manage it? How do you strategize it? That is what the design pattern game is here. Okay, everybody understand this concept, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to clarify the difference between, why we are teaching you design patterns today. Everybody get it? If you have a question, you can raise your hand. For now, if you don't have a question, don't raise your hand, because I know there's some people have raised their hand to comment, but you can probably put your hands down. So Kiran, you have a question?
Yes, Prasad.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have joined lately. I just had one question. Can you define the difference between design patterns and design system actually? Is it a different, or is it just a synonym for both this?
A design system consists of design patterns.
Okay.
Okay, so I will in the next couple of slides, I will explain to you a little bit more and you will understand the nuances there. But for now, I just want you to understand design pattern. What is a pattern? That's something that I want you to get.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, Nirupama.
Prasad, you said people are working in design pattern and the lead is going to take that, how it is going to be taken, I did not understand.
Okay, just look at this graphic. On one side, it's a static graphic. On the other side, you're basically zooming in, right?
Yes,
So A design pattern is like, you're basically saying, okay, it's a triangle, there are multiple triangles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But the point is like, okay, when you have to deploy it into a real world scenario, you have to understand where are the triangles, how are they deployed, what is the single thing that keeps all of this together. Right? So one person is creating the rules of how other people will create patterns, whereas the other person is creating the pattern itself.
Okay, means that if I create some pattern, complete organization should follow the same pattern.
Yes. So that organization, who's creating the organizational rules is the mindset guy.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, who's creating that feature level rules is the design pattern person, the individual person.
Okay. 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 Yeah, got it, Prasad. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank
So
you.
that's what it is. So that's what is the difference between both of those. So when you look at the first image, it looks, it looks like a fairly complex kind of a situation. But then what the organizational guys doing is they're not worried about the complexity. They're looking at what is repeating, what are the structures. They're identifying all the commonalities and they're defining this is how we're going to design our design patterns.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, got it, Prasad. Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead. Go ahead, Vivek.
Yeah, sure. Just wanted to understand this through an example. Like, can we consider the spectrum, which is by Adobe, design pattern?
So I will give you some examples. So let me give you some examples and then we can get back to that question. Is that okay?
Sure.
Awesome. Cool. So, and again, this is not the standard definition of what design patterns are. I'm simply putting it in a way that is understandable. Okay. Now, when you go out, you will probably hear terminology, design systems, design patterns. They're interchangeable and I'm not worried about them right now. I'm only looking at practically explaining what the difference is. So do not worry about the definitions. Prasad's definitions are always a little bit loose in some ways. Okay. So don't worry about that. Just think about how we're going to execute. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So when you're thinking about doing UX design, they're different. What are the patterns that you will see? Okay, similar to the triangle that I showed you, at the highest level, what are you doing? You're creating an experience, user experience, right? So the first thing is at the highest level, you're creating an experience. An experience is when you look at Amazon, it's like, okay, it's a sign up experience or a sign in experience. How do you go from one page to another page? And that's what you're looking at. Okay. Now, if you were to, and these are what I would say the equivalent of design patterns at an experience level. Okay. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when you look here at one page, you realize that the way that page is designed, the layout and the way different widgets are played together are also patterns. Okay. And this is what you'd call probably at a, this is probably a page level pattern or a section level pattern. Okay. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper, okay, what you would see is you would see individual elements. So this is what this is very similar to what is atomic design, right? So you have atoms, molecules, compounds, the same thing. These are the atoms. So you'll have a text box, which is an atom. You'll have a label that's on top of it. That's an atom. You combine these atoms together. You create like a widget. You combine multiple widgets together. You create a section. You combine multiple sections together. You create an experience. Okay, but the point is, what is interesting is all of these are repeating patterns. Okay, now what we tend to do as designers is what at least rookie designers do is when they get into design, they start looking at everything and they start getting overwhelmed by the amount of work that needs to be done. All you need to think about is, see, every pattern is solving a problem. Okay, so if you understand what problem the pattern is solving, now you're able to create a scalable solution, whether it is at an experience level, whether it's a section level, or whether it is an atomic level. Okay, everybody get this concept? Just type in yes if you get it, and then I can keep moving. Awesome, cool. Now let's go on to the next slide. So this is what we are going to do over the next 3 days, okay? And this is going to require a lot of thinking from your side. This is going to require some amount of time. And what I would advise is if you really want to learn this stuff, you want to practice. Put your pen to paper. Do not just listen to this class and walk away, because this will be just like watching a YouTube video. And I know a lot of you will also be asking me questions like, hey, can you give me access to the videos? No, we do not give access to these videos because we want you to be in the class, present and listening and engaged. Okay, so today we are going to talk about at an atomic level. So just take a search box or a text box, and how do we design that text box? We are only going to talk about that. And I'm going to teach you how to think about that element. Okay. Then tomorrow we will talk at a section level. How do we do sections? And day after tomorrow, we will talk experience level. Okay. So by the time this is done, you will have a framework of thinking and solving problems at a widget level all the way to an experience level. Okay. So everybody ready for the class now? And you understand what we're going to do in the next 3 days? Awesome. For those guys that are on LinkedIn, you can just type in your answers or your questions. There's somebody that's looking at it, and those questions will be transmitted over to me, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so how would you design a text box? Okay, there are two different variations. So which one is the correct way of designing a text box? A or B? Just type it in. For the LinkedIn guys, just type it on your, in your chat, for in your comments, and then for the rest of you, there's a poll here. All right, and what I want to understand is, why is A or B correct? All right, so I think we can close the poll at this point. Go ahead, Ram. You raised your hand. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So I think B is correct. In my opinion, it is correct because when we see the header at the top, it gives a design language what we are following, a reference to that for all the text fields. And we also see that the different cases like a hover state, focus state, the error state, correct state. So all these scenarios is considered, and a design pattern for each of these scenarios is created for each of these scenarios. And yeah, in my opinion, these are the reasons why I feel B is correct, is the correct approach. Okay.
So what I'm hearing you say is, number one, it is communicating the context in which the particular object is going to be used.
Yes, Prasad. Yeah.
Right? Then the second thing that you said is, you've also discussed the section B also talked about different variations of how it's going to be used.
Yes.
Okay. And what else?
And I can see apart from different variations.
And it's also showing the interaction between different elements.
Different elements, yes.
Isn't it? How would that text box look with a checkbox or with a switch, with a radio button? All those combinations are understood.
Yes.
Right? So when you're thinking at a design pattern level, a text box by itself may not mean anything, but understanding the context in which it works is what makes the difference.
Yes.
Right? So good job, Ram. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so now today we are going to take just a simple text box, and we are going to think about how would you design a text box. Okay, and this is for all the engineers, architects, and the sciencey background guys. I think you are going to love this. So the math background guys, you are going to enjoy this. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so when you're designing a widget, it's a simple checklist. Okay. Step 1 is what are the goals that the widget is going to be used with. Okay, so what are the user goals, what are the business goals, and what is the context in which this widget is going to be used? Okay, then step 2 is you're identifying all the possible alternatives. Okay, and step 3, you're evaluating the alternatives. Okay, it's a simple 3-point checklist. Okay, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to apply this to design a text box. Okay, Arun, you have a point, you have a question? You can unmute yourself and ask the question, Arun. Okay, no question. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So now imagine this is what my requirements are. Okay, the user goal is to reduce their effort. They want to keep it as easy as possible. The business goal is to collect the user's details correctly. Okay, if somebody does spelling mistakes, whatever, it's not going to work. So you have to collect the data correctly. Okay, and what is the context? The audience is, it's a senior citizen. Okay, they have a short memory. They're not familiar with technology and they want to be slow and deliberate about everything. Okay, they want to be careful. They don't want to make mistakes. So what is the information you're collecting? You want to collect date of birth. Okay, and we have decided that we're going to use a simple text box to collect the date of birth. Okay, now what is the context? They want to apply for their pension. Okay, so there are serious consequences for making a mistake on this box. Okay, everybody understand this? The context? All right, so now let's go on to the next slide. So when you are identifying your step 2, you're identifying how does it look, and second is how does it behave. You have to look at both. So design pattern is not simply how it looks. It is how it looks and how it behaves. Okay, how it behaves with the user, how it interacts with other widgets, all of those behaviors have to be thought through. Okay, so we are going to take the first step of this alternative, which is how does it look. We are only going to look at the first element. Let's look at that. Okay, so when you're looking at how it looks, what are all the variables that you have in your hands? Okay, and this is a very important skill. This is called variabilization. Okay, and when you learn variabilization, you not only do you variabilize at a widget level, you can variabilize at a macro level as well. If somebody tells you, like, I want you to create a medical app for identifying problems before they even happen. Okay, it's an impossible problem, at least from the outset. When you look at it, it looks impossible. But then you learn to break down the component issues, okay, and then you solve each of the independent problems. That's exactly what you're doing here. You're variabilizing the visual components. So what are the variables here? Okay, at the highest level, there's a label, there's an input text that is inside the text box, and there is the box itself. Correct? So everybody with me so far? Now, using these 3 variables, how many variations can you do for a text box? Anybody want to guess? Just type it in. How many variations can you do for a text box just using the label, the box, and the input text? Vivek says 6. Anybody want to change that number? 27. Okay. And yeah, just put a ballpark number, whatever you think is possible. So Akash says 3 to the power n. What is n, Akash? Okay. So, okay, Akash just randomly made up a number. Okay, cool. So n is the number of variables. Okay, 3 to the power, the number of variables. Well, not necessarily, right? So now let's go to the next one. So you've got your numbers. It's anywhere between like 27 to 6. Okay, so let me look at it in a reasonable, logical manner. It's just a combinatorics, right? So label. So label has 2 components to it. One is the position and the second is the representation. Right? If you want to do the representation, you can do only a label, you can do an icon, you can do an icon plus label, or no icon, no label. Right? If you want to look at position, you can put the label inside the text box, you can put it outside the text box. Okay. If you put it inside the text box, you're doing left justified, right justified. Right? If you're doing outside, it's left, right, top, bottom. Right? And even within that, you have so many variations. So at the very simple stuff, only for the variable, only for the label, there are 31 variations of doing the label, only labels. Okay. And I'll tell you why. So design is the only job that allows you to, is not the only job, but it's probably one of the hottest jobs right now, which will allow you to go work anywhere in the world. Okay. And understanding this allows you to create a global career, not a national career, right? And so that is something I want you to run through this in a more systematic manner. So label is 31 variations. Let's go to the next one. Right? Now, box size, you're looking at the box. So there are 3 ways. You can break a box because date of birth can be broken into 3 different boxes. Okay. You can do the orientation, which is horizontal or vertical, the box, and you can do the size, large, medium, and small. Okay. There are 12 variations for the box at a very simple level. I mean, if you look a little bit deeper, I'm sure you'll find more, but I'm simplifying it to 12. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. Now, if you were to just combine the label and the box, how many variations do you have? 372 different variations. Right? And this is what I say is interesting, is design that was done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? It was an art form. The designer would be, he would just come there and do it, right? So, but today it's much more of a discipline. It's a science. It's an engineering discipline in some ways. There's a lot of logic involved. So just like, if you were learning to fly an aeroplane during World War I, when planes were just invented, they'll give you 5 hours of classes, make you sit in a plane, go up. If you didn't kill yourself, you came back, you became an ace. Okay. Today, you're not allowed to fly a plane until you've got at least 1,000 hours in the, in a simulator. Right? Because this complexity of the product and the complexity of the science has increased so much. And this is what I'm talking about, the complexity. So every designer has to know this stuff if you want to create global careers. All right. So now the 372 variations only for label and box. Okay. Now let's go on the next level. So you might ask me, Prasad, is it possible to have vertical boxes? Is it possible to have like right aligned, this is exactly what it is. If you look at Japanese, form designs, you will see there, you'll see both vertical as well as horizontal. Right? You look at Arabic, it's the other way. They read from right to left. Right? If you look at English, it's left to right. Right? Now, if you look at mobile, it's better to kind of do it as where the label is inside the text box. So as the context changes, all of these possibilities are realistic. I'm not talking about unrealistic possibilities, right? That is what I mean by the difference between an international career and a domestic career, right? If you're creating an international product, you kind of understand the context in which each of these variations will work. And now you know when to apply what. Okay. If you're just thinking, I just have to do this one screen and this is my only possible way is I'm going to put the label on top of the text box, then you are only creating for a very limited market, for a very limited problem space. So everybody get this, what I'm trying to communicate here? Just type in yes. Awesome. So Rajiv, are there any questions on the LinkedIn side that I need to answer? You'll probably unmute yourself, or who's tracking LinkedIn? Saurabh, are you doing it or Rajiv doing it?
I'm doing. There are no questions as of now.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So now let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now the question comes is, okay, there are 317 variations of a text box if I only mess with the label and the box. So, but how do I decide which one is correct for me? Okay. So that is the second part of it. So let's actually now look at question number 1, which is when will you use a left justified horizontal label and why? Okay, can anybody tell me when would you use a left justified label? So what is interesting is left justified means that the label is not sticking to the text box. Okay, it is to the left, and so all your labels are aligned in one vertical space. So can you tell me when you would use that? Go ahead, Vivek.
Sir, where the reader would read from left to right, there we can use that.
When what? Could you repeat?
Wherever the user has to read from left to right.
Sure, I would agree with that, but you can also, you can put the text on the left and you can write justified, where the text and the text box are sticking together. Right? So your answer is partially correct. This would apply in cultures where people are reading from left to right, but even there are two variations, isn't it? One, you can stick it to the text box, one, you can keep the space. So which of those variations will you use when? So go ahead, Ram. So you got the answer 50%. So Ram, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to take a guess that depending on whether the website will be displayed on a phone device, a mobile device, or a web device, we are going to have a huge screen space, right? And to cover or to negate extra white space or the negative space, maybe I would prefer to have this kind of a design where the text is not stick to the input box.
Okay, so what you're saying is where the space is limited and you want to make sure there's enough white space between both of those. But why do you want to keep white space in the first place? That's the question.
I wanted to say it the other way. Basically, for a phone device, because we have a space limitation, or even we are holding it in a portrait mode, right? At that point in time, because the input box itself has very minimum space, so having the text outside the box does not help because we cannot. It will, from a readability perspective, I feel it is not good enough.
Okay, so you're telling me the opposite. You're saying when not to use it. Is that right?
Yes.
You're saying we won't use it when there is limited space.
Limited space, yeah.
Okay, I could buy that. I could buy that argument. Okay. So Nirupama, you want to be the last person, you want to say when you would use this?
Based on our users' mental model, we just focus on left to right. So labels will be aligned from left and numbers will be right justified.
No. So there's a clarification that I made there in Nirupama. So the mental model, I agree. That is a partial answer. Okay.
Yeah.
But the point is, even with the left, where your label is to the left of your text box, you can align it to the text box itself.
Right? But the spacing we have to provide between that.
So there is no guarantee. Again, that's what I say with design pattern. Nothing is a rule. You have to understand why those rules are made.
Why we are going to provide space between.
So go back to the previous slide. Can you go back to the previous slide? Okay, so look at this. So there's two designs, right?
Yes.
On the top one, there is the name, and the bottom one, the name is aligned, isn't it?
To maintain the consistency.
Both of them are valid. Okay, they will both work in different business use cases. So my question was, under what use case would the first design pattern work? Okay.
The reading time decreases when labels are closer to the text box.
Yes. So the reading time decreases. So the reading time increases. So if you go to the next slide, so what you're telling me is the reading time will increase when the label is farther away from the text box.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That
scanning. Why do you want to increase the time then? What is the benefit of increasing the time?
See, our scanning pattern starts from left to right. We are going to scan now, Prasad.
I understand, but why do you want to
Yeah.
slow people down? That is my question. What is the advantage for you as a product company? Because every product says how quickly you are making them use it, right? So
Yes, yes,
now you're
yes,
saying
yes.
I'm going to slow down people. That is like a recipe to get fired as a designer, isn't it?
I know, but I can't express how to express.
That is a difference. So that's
Yeah.
why we are doing this. It's good. It's good. I'm glad you tried, because what I'm trying to do is this. There's a difference between a chef and a regular guy who goes to a restaurant. Okay.
Yes,
The
yes,
regular
yes.
guy who goes to a restaurant will say the food tastes good. I don't know why it tastes good, right? But the chef will actually go there and say, you put a little bit of mustard, you put lemon instead of salt. That is why this is tasting so good, right? So I want you to appreciate, I want you to understand what makes this pattern work or not work. Okay.
Yeah.
You should be able to have the vocabulary to discuss it. That is an
Yes,
important skill. Okay. So
yes.
let's go to the next slide. Okay. So think about it. So this is, when you're thinking about this, the context is, when you put it to the left-hand side, the context is, it's good for languages like English and Hindi, where you're reading from left to right. Good, right? Latin languages usually are good for that, right? Good for forms where accuracy is needed. So when you slow down people, you make them more deliberate. You make them more careful, right? When you speed up people, you increase the reward, but you reduce the time to reward, but at the same time, you're increasing the risk of errors. So for every medicine, like there is a side effect. As a doctor, you understand this medicine has this side effect. As a designer, you have to understand for every design pattern, what are the side effects of it. Okay. Now the pros is it's very easy to scan. Okay. So I just have to keep my screen in one place and I just have to look email address, password, account URL, and agreement. Okay, good. I know what is required of me. Okay. It's very easy for people to understand that this is what is required. I can get going. Okay. Now the con is it is harder to correlate between the label and the box. So people have to spend a little bit more time. Right. So now, in which case, would you use this for the pension? Would you use this design pattern for a pension application? Yes, no. Yes, it is likely a good solution because you want to make it slow, you want to make it deliberate, and therefore it is a good idea to use it for a pension application. Right. Now let's go on to the next slide. So when you look at the right-hand side, same discussion. Okay. Is there any case when this would work?
When we have to put amounts or
when we have to put amounts, why?
Amounts are right justified in a text box.
No, so this is the label. The label is right justified in relation to the text box.
Okay.
Okay. So when will you use it? Go ahead, Anshul. You can unmute yourself, Anshul.
Sorry,
hey, I need
sir.
to see you, man. No camera, then I don't feel connected to you.
Sorry, I raised hand for the previous question. I didn't lower my hand. I cannot even guess in this scenario.
Okay, awesome. No worries. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Nirupama.
That is fast completion time, no, Prasad, if it is labels are right justified.
Yes. So the answer was there in the previous discussion. So awesome. Good catch.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
you're speeding up the completion times, absolutely you want to do this. When errors are not consequential. Okay. So if errors are not going to, or you have a mechanism to catch the error at a later point, it's fine, right? Or if you're making people enter information that they've entered so many times that they have muscle memory. You don't want them to think too much about it. Like your address, you fill in your address all the time. Why do you even need to think about it? Right? And so that is when you use the right alignment. So again, this is good because your label is left aligned with relation to the text box, but the justification is right justified with, with relation to its box, right? So when you look at the context, it's again, Latin languages, English, Hindi, those languages are great, right? Good for forms where speed is needed. Correlation between label and data is easy. And again, if you think about Amazon or when you look at e-commerce websites, the slower you make it, the less likely that somebody will buy from you. So you just want them to enter it as quickly as possible. So obviously you're going to right align it. You see that difference? Everybody get this? Why right alignment and left alignment? A simple thing like this has such a deep science behind it. Everybody get this, understand it. So Punish, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, actually, I was having a question.
Camera, if possible.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the little question was not exactly related to this context, but the thing is like in a form, there can be a multiple fields in which we want user key on some fields, he want to spend time, but we want in some fields, he should be filled like it does not require that much time.
Right.
He stop thinking. So, but
Yes.
like if we do key, okay, but we cannot do that. Key, some fields we do left align and some fields we do right align. So because there will be a consistency breakdown there.
Okay. Interesting
How-
problem. Yes.
So how we can like tackle care of that issue?
Okay, so let me rephrase it for everyone, and then that's hopefully, you can correct me if I got your question correctly or wrong. What you're saying is there a possibility that different form fields will have different goals? As a result, you may have to change the layouts, and in which case, then it is going to break consistency and it's going to cause bigger problems. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. So let's actually take this use case. Okay. So if somebody is saying that let us say there is a form field that you cannot get wrong. Okay. So you want to reduce the time. Which one is it? In this case, let's say it is.
I think I'm purchasing anything an e-commerce detail form.
Yeah, but let us say that.
I think it can be like I want to transfer money to something. So that account number may need that much time for a user. He must.
So you want to increase the time for account number, but you want to decrease the time for
IFSC code. I think for the address or the
address. You want to decrease for the address. You want to increase for the account number.
Exactly. In the same form, we want.
Okay. So I get that there is a possibility of multiple goals. Okay. But does a user? There's two ways I would answer this. The first way I would answer it. Does your user think about those forms as different things, or is that everything one task? So because if you're transferring money, my level of risk is very high, isn't it? So I want to be deliberate about everything. I'm not going to choose and say, I'm not going to be deliberate about this, and I'm going to be deliberate about that. Correct? So from a user perspective, users don't look at it at a field level, they look at it at a task level. So at a task level, whatever their perceptions and their needs are, you can handle it. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. Okay, now let us go back to all the designs, all the text boxes. So let us assume that, no, we still want to find a different solution. Okay, we're not happy with that approach. Let's look at all the other all. So let's go back to the page where we have all the other alternatives. Go back. Yeah. Now, go to the next one. I believe it is slide number 17 or 18. Go 19. Let's go 19. Yeah, stay here. So is there any other design that will solve that problem here? So you basically go back to the drawing board and you see if there's a pattern that solves it. If there's no pattern, then you create a new pattern. Okay. And what is interesting within our design spaces, you see tens of new design patterns coming out every year because new and unique situations are happening. Because as the world is evolving, our problems are evolving, and therefore design patterns also have to evolve for those problems that are coming out. Right. And so the thing is, you're looking at these patterns and saying, is there any other pattern that solves it? No. Well, let me see if there's some other pattern that I can create that will solve it. That's a combination of these.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Punish?
Yeah, I think partially, I got that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have to
Cool.
Definitely. Thank
yeah,
you so much.
and I'll give you some resources so you can understand this. But when we finish our 3 days, I will give resources so you can actually understand how the system, how the whole design pattern ecosystem works in the design community. Okay.
Definitely, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And we'll definitely clarify. And I want to make sure that, if on day 3 you're not clear on this concept, come back to me and I'll make sure you're clear.
Yeah, that means a lot. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's keep going. All right, let's keep going to the next one. Okay, so now you've basically done the other way, the same way. Now you're looking at the next alternative, right? So when would you do it on the other side? Okay, then you're saying, well, it's Arabic languages, good for forms where accuracy is needed. Again, the same, if you're doing on the other side, the more distance you create, the more accurate you get. The slower the person is, and the more accurate you get. That's the same kind of equation that you play out here as well. Okay, and easy to scan vertically, correlation between label and the data takes time. So that's how you play it. And this is a real form that is used to fill out the data. So there's an English form, and on the other side, there's an Arabic form. Both are exactly the same, and you can see how they're filled out. Right? And again, this is what you want to think about, internationalization. And again, as you're designing for products, today it is, if you want to put India on the global map, or you want to create products in India that are globally consequential, you really do need to think about impacts in languages other than what you're familiar with. And so this is an exercise that you need to constantly be thinking about at the back of your mind. All right. So let's go on to the next one. Punish, you still have a question? Okay, done. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so now let's look at when would you use what size? Okay, can somebody tell me when you would use A, B, or C? Just, you can just unmute yourself and tell me when you would use A, B, or C. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Madhav.
Sir, label A is used when there is long text like name, surname, or address. Label B will be used where you have a limited number of characters. And C is most of numbers, mobile number or international type code numbers.
Okay, so that's an interesting component. So you're saying that when the length of the text is long, medium, or small, you use different sizes. But I will flip it the other way. Actually, let me ask Aditi. Aditi, do you want to tell us when you would use the different labels? And if possible, can you turn on your camera, please?
Sorry, sir. I have joined through my company laptop and I won't be able to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think label A is used for, long text where we write our name or maybe email address. And label B is specifically for, I think, mobile number where we have defined length. And label C is maybe for drop down for selecting, something like male, female, or some category.
Why do you feel that?
I think it is very short, and I think that length should be only for some drop down selecting.
Interesting, right? So you
I
feel that,
yeah. I don't think anything can be typed in. It is very small, and it can be only adjusting 2-3, letters or some numbers.
So what you're saying is the size of the text box can also be used to give a hint to somebody about what kind of data to expect.
Yes, maybe.
Right. So, for example, Kumar is saying CVV code. So, which size will you put? Would you think CVV code will go in? A, B, or C? Aditi.
Label C.
See, that's because it's also creating expectations. So, one is, yes, if I want to get longer data, you can use bigger sizes. That's one way to do it. The other reason why you use different segments, sizes and segmentation, is to create expectation within the people that instead of reading the label, you can directly look at it and say, yeah, it's for telephone number, it's for CVV. You can tell it. Isn't it? So it's about creating unconscious expectations. So this is what you call, don't make somebody read. They just look at the shape and they guess what it is and it's correct. Yeah. And so if you look at it now, when you now think back at all the forms that you fill, the different sizes, the designer is already seeding in your mind. You don't actually read the label every time. Right? So that is also increasing the speed of engagement. Right. So now let's go on to the next slide. So now here's a simple question. Okay. For what case? So when you look at E, what do you think? What data should go in there in E?
Birthday.
Date of birth. Okay. Good. Anything else can go into E?
Phone numbers.
Sorry?
Phone numbers, where you have 9-digit numbers.
Possible phone number, even 10-digit numbers, because in the
Aadhaar card
US you
number.
will have 3, 3, and 4 combinations. So that also works. Okay. Actually, that's a good question. Let's look at Aadhaar card. Okay. Madhuri is saying it's Aadhaar card. Okay. Do you think E is good for Aadhaar card?
So am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead, Madhuri.
Yeah, I feel that label E will be a good for the Aadhaar card, as we
Okay.
can divide that into, it would be easy for the user to enter the number for it. Aadhaar card, we do have a big number, I guess 9, I guess. So user can easily divide 333 like that instead of
No, so the
entering.
Aadhaar card is actually a 4-digit number, and it's a 444. So it's a total of 12 number digits in there. Okay. So when you look at the size of label E, it actually does not communicate Aadhaar card because it should be a bigger number. Right? If it was just slightly bigger, this actually indicates that it's like, it's a 333 kind of a combination. That's what it feels. So all
Credit
three
card.
numbers are the same. So if you're saying
Credit
it's going
card.
to be US, sorry?
Credit card, Prasad.
Credit cards are also 4 digits.
4 digits.
Right? So that's why your initial guess, date of birth, was anything less than 3 digits would actually fit in here. Okay. If you wanted to do a telephone number, a US telephone number, which is 334, you would put 2 boxes that are the same size. The third box will be slightly bigger than the first 2 boxes. Right? If you're doing an Aadhaar card, you will actually make this slightly bigger enough, maybe say probably about, say, 5 digits long, 5 digits long, and the last 5th digit is just a blank, right? So people know that this is a 444 combination. Okay. Windows key activation. Exactly. When you look at Windows key activation, again, those numbers, those windows are much bigger. Those boxes are much bigger, and you have more of those boxes. Right. So again, when you start realizing, yeah, there's so many interesting ways that you can play with segmentation and sizes, isn't it? And segmentation and sizes, when done smartly, will actually significantly improve the quality of data that's coming in and reduce the guesswork on the perspective of the user that's filling in the data. Okay, exactly, Aditi. The gutter space should also be taken into consideration, which is one of the reasons I was saying, if you're doing an Aadhaar card, instead of doing 4 digits, you do for 5 digits. So you have enough gutter for the 4-digit entry. So good point, Aditi. So let's go on to the next one. So now the question is, how many variations? So this is, again, what I say is a very logical way of looking at it, right? So it's a, there is no creativity. And this is what I see. This is where I have a problem with a lot of designers that come in and say, I'm going to be very creative and I'm going to create a box. My deal is like, why you're being creative at a box, right? Think about how you can creatively solve the problem. So don't worry about this. So here, this is a very easy mechanical way of solving the problem. It's a very logical way of, not mechanical, but a very logical way of solving the problem. So if your context is senior citizen, short memory, not familiar with technology, want to be deliberate. Okay. So, and you want the date of birth and you want to apply for pension. That is the context. Okay. So what should the size of the box be? Large, medium, small. Should it be segmented? Yes or no? So Nirumaba says it's large. Okay. But when I would say if it's large, then people could put it MMDDYY, or they could say, month January 5, 2012. They can put it that way. So you have many different ways of entering the data. Right? So probably the best way is small, segmented. Okay. It needs to be horizontal. The orientation needs to be horizontal because you're doing it for India. If you're not doing it for India, then you have to basically relook. What is the culture? What is if it's Japan, possibly vertical. Okay. So now let's go on to the next slide. When you look at it, you're just looking at medium, horizontal, segmented, Okay. If you're doing on the top, it should be left justified. If you're doing on the left, it should be right justified. Okay. And it should be a label and it should be inside. If it's inside, then it should be left justified. Pretty much all done. So possibly there are only 2 possible variations that will meet your requirements here. Right? Out of 317 possible variations. Right? Now, this might seem like it is very complex and very difficult, but the point is, what I'm teaching you how to do is I'm teaching you how to walk. And when you're walking first time, when the baby is walking, it will feel very cumbersome and tiresome. Like, why do I have to think about all 317? Why do I have to think about so many things? But when you practice it, eventually it will become second nature to you. It will be unconscious. You don't even have to think about it. Okay. And that is the state that you want to be at. That is how you become the chef. Okay. Everybody got how we got to this, how we solved this problem and identified the correct model? Awesome. So somebody had a question. Let me see. Can you explain why the date of birth entering is different in US and India? These are cultural contexts, right? So in India, at least I think it is month, day, and year. Is that, I'm assuming that's what it is. In the US, it's day, month, and year. So, but the only problem is when you have a date that is less than 12 on both sides, then you're likely to create confusion, where the month and the year, month and the day, both are a number less than 12 or less than 12, then you are likely to create significant confusion and errors. Okay. Does that answer your question, Sanjeev? Okay. Akash is the other way. I'm glad. I've basically gone between India and the US so many times that I've given up figuring out which one is which. I just look at the label and figure out what to do. So yeah. Awesome. So are we clear with how to do your atomic level design patterns and how to think through them? Good. Awesome. Okay. Now, if you do nothing, but you just simply practice this stuff, I guarantee you that you do this for 15 days for just the widgets that you see, right? Your level of thought and the way you describe will change dramatically. Right? And your level of maturity, even just within your organization, changes. If you just don't attend any other day, but just this is what you get out of it. Okay. It's a very logical way of solving any problem that you get. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. So let's go to the next one. So now we are going to look at how it behaves. Okay. So let's go to the next one. So I'm at this point saying how many possible states are there for this text box when you're looking at behavior. Can anybody guess?
Sorry
just type it in. Just type it in so everybody else can see as well. So,
Prasad, I think we have missed question 3. Can we?
Okay.
Can we do it again? Actually, we skipped to the question 3.
Question 3. Can you go back? Which one?
The label on the top. Yeah, we are talking about the label on the left and right justified, but we didn't talk about the label on the top of the field, text field.
Yeah, that's okay, because I'm not going to talk about all the details. I think that is homework for you, right? Because there's just so much material to cover that if I go through each one of those, then this takes about a semester in a university system to learn properly. And unfortunately, we don't necessarily have that much time, and that's why I'm kind of covering and giving you the higher level thought process. But then, if you do some sufficient research and homework, you'll be able to get there. Is that okay?
Yeah, got it.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, these topics are all very heavy duty. Like when I was learning, it took me a few months to get drilled into it. So, all this stuff will take time. It's not an overnight thing. Yeah. Okay. So when you look at a text box, how many possible states are there? So everybody is saying between 4 to 5, normal, select, positive, negative. Now let's go on to the next slide. There are actually about 20 different states. Right. And this is what I mean as the difference between flying in 1920 versus flying in 2020, right? So in 2020, you have to think about so many things. There's so many different technical elements that you need to be aware of. Okay, so when you're designing, you need to actively think about more than 20 is like the bare minimum, but more, all of these, you need to think about them, and you're planning for majority of these states. You might actually decide, well, the overflow, the filled, and the empty are probably the same thing. I'm just hypothetically saying, but you still have to make that decision. And then you say, okay, I'm looking at 15 or 16 states. I'm okay with that. But you have to consciously make the decision, which of these states I'm going to look at, which of these states I'm going to somehow, create one common use case for them and treat them that way. But you still have to look at all of them and systematically make your decisions. Okay, cool. And then one other data point I wanted to share is, let's go back. Now, when you're looking at the behavior, okay, one more slide. Yeah, I want you to think about 3 different things for every widget at an atomic level. You're going to do this at an atomic level, at a section level, as well as at an experience level. What are the possible states for this atom, for this section, for this experience? Okay, where am I going to give feedback for this atom, for this section, for this experience? How am I going to give help for this atom, for this section, for this experience? Okay, those are the things that you need to think when you're doing behavior. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so now when you're thinking about it, this is how you basically come in. So you say, okay, well, what are the different ways that I'm going to present this? So you can say when the text box is in focus, when it's out of focus, when it is enabled, when it's disabled. So you're looking at all of these different combinations, and you are planning for all of these different states. Okay, now what gets you hired in some of the best companies is when somebody goes in with this mindset of being very conscientious and detail oriented. That basically tells the hiring manager this guy knows what they're doing. Okay, if you go in with just what the first design was, like that is where the first thing was, where you're just putting everything on top of each other and saying 3. My question is, why did you choose 3? Why did you not choose 5? Why did you not choose 10? So there needs to be a rationale, there needs to be a logic in how you're approaching your design decisions. Okay, go ahead, Jashwant.
Good evening. So I have a question like, we are using colors to define the state. So what if a person is colorblind? He can't differentiate between.
That's a use case. You have to plan for it. Right. And again, think of this as, this is not the rule. I'm not giving you the rule, you have to do exactly this, right? I'm just saying, this is how you need to think. You, for your constraints that you are under operation, you have to think according to the problem you're solving. Okay, cool. I'm only teaching you a method of solving it. I'm not teaching you the details of these individual methods. Okay, cool. Everybody clear with this? Just type in yes, and then you're good to go. Awesome. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So the key takeaway that when you're looking at it is, this is what you need to do. So if you're writing down one thing, write down this one slide. Okay. Because this is what you have to do. And then if you can...
we put 3 times inside.
Okay. So you're identifying the goals, the context in which the solution is needed, user goals, business goals, context, and then you're identifying the alternatives, you're evaluating the alternatives. Okay. This is what you need to do. All right. And then Rajiv, if you can very quickly click on this link here. So we also have a free course for you. This is all free. Nothing, you don't need to pay anything for it. So click on this course, the form design course. Rajiv, I think you're not sharing your screen. You're probably just sharing a window.
Yes, sharing it.
So Saurabh, you're sharing?
Yeah, I have it open.
Okay. Yeah. So all of this content is free. All you just have to do is just register, and then it's all free of cost for you guys. You can access it. But form design is the course that you need to look at to kind of understand. This will cover like a little bit more of the details in terms of how you do form design and stuff like that. So you want to understand that this is where you go in. So can you go to prerequisites? Okay, so these are the things that you need to know before you do this course. Go on to the next one. Right. Step by step, identify when the form is needed. So you will be able to understand how to design using an individual element, how to design a complete form. Okay. So what I taught you today was the foundations of it. And then using these foundations, you will actually do form design. Okay. And I would strongly encourage that look at this, read it, learn it, understand it, and then internalize it. And the one other thing that we've also put is related courses at the end and other helpful courses as resources as well. So both of these guys are there, right? So it will tell you exactly what else you need to do, right? So these are content that we've identified outside, including articles and videos and stuff like that. You can literally go in, click on those, and then get going. Okay. Cool. So let's go back to the presentation. Awesome. So today we are done with designing widgets for scalability. Everybody understand this concept. Everybody is comfortable. This is the time to ask your question. I'll make sure everybody is clear on this. Questions, thoughts, doubts, concerns? Aditi says, do you provide a separate course for Figma? I'm glad you asked that, because philosophically, I do not believe in giving courses on tools. Because if you're doing UX design, I mean, 10 years ago or 8 years ago when we started UXReactor, for me, what was big deal was like, in those days, it was Photoshop. Okay. Then we had a tool called UXPin. Then we had Adobe XD. Then we had Figma. So the tools are changing pretty much on an annual basis, because it's such a competitive landscape that if I teach a tool to you today, you are not going to, it's very hard for you to kind of say that, okay, tomorrow new tool comes, now let's go learn that, right? My preference is I would rather teach you how to learn rather than teach you every tool one by one. And the other thing is, UX is, and this is something that people ask, hey, this was when I became a UX guy. That was around the Y2K time, and everybody was engineers and all that stuff, software guys. So parents would ask me, so what platform do you work in? I would say Excel and Word. And they'd look at, how is this guy getting paid to use Excel and Word? The point is, we use our minds, right? We're independent of tools. We're solving problems. The tool is simply a way to express what we have. And that is one of the reasons why I kind of struggle, because I feel, yes, I need to teach tools because you need to know the discipline of using tools like a professional, right? It's not just, doing something to make something look good, but how do you professionally use a tool so that you can collaborate with other people? How do you professionally use tools to kind of make your system scalable? How do you use tools to kind of be very nimble when changes come in? So those kinds of things you have to learn. I feel that I have to teach that. But at the same time, I also feel that the moment I start teaching tools, I'm actually telling people the wrong message that, you use tools, then UX, you don't need, UX is tools. And so that's where I'm kind of struggling. I'm kind of torn. For now, I've made a decision that I'm not going to teach tools because I want people to focus on the thought process rather than the tools. But, part of our intensive program, when we do run it, we run it, I think, once every 6 months or so. And it's a year-long program that in part of that, we teach tools, but for now, we don't do it as a separate thing or anything like that. Right? So that's where it is. So yeah. And Vasim says you can search on YouTube. And this is one other thing that I want to say is, like, you can search on YouTube and you'll find thousands of monkeys teaching you features, right, of a tool. The point is, it's not about features of a tool. How do you use the tool to be effective? That is what you have to learn. That's the difference between doing gully cricket versus doing international cricket, right? In gully cricket, you can play your bat and ball anyways, right? When you're playing international cricket, it's like how you angle your bat, what bat you use, everything is important. Okay, so that is what it is. So YouTube will teach you how to play gully cricket. But the international cricket, you have to learn the professional etiquettes of using a tool. And that is something that I have not seen anybody do yet. And I personally do not want to get into right now. So sorry, Aditi. Cool. Go ahead, Vivek. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Just going back to the right where we started, we were talking about the mindset. So now let's say we have that thing and we are a manager at some firm. So how do we exercise that thing? Like, do we document these things, or do we keep these in mind while evaluating something? Or like,
no, you have to document all of these. You have to create a justification system for everybody, right? So you have one, you have to document. Second, you have to socialize this documentation and your logic behind it. So you're not documenting widgets. You're documenting the logic behind those widgets, right? Okay. And you're saying this is how it's going to be. And then you have to socialize a process. So how do you do change management? Okay. So if some designer comes across a problem where an existing widget does not solve the problem, okay, so then how do they change it? So how do they come back and communicate? How do you get consensus? How do you kind of push a new alternative into space, right? So that is what you need to think through. So that is the mindset component of it.
So then it becomes very close to the system, right?
Yes, that is how you do the design system. So the mindset is more into the design systems. So even within the design system, there are people that will do individual elements, right? A design system is not just the elements, it is the elements plus the governance process that you have set on top of it, right? Together, they make a system. If you just put a bunch of widgets, they are not a system.
Got it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go. Madhav, you want to answer that? You want to ask your question?
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead, Madhav.
So, sir, regarding this broader level of thinking on all the different variations and completely to narrow down to only one or two combinations, it will be really difficult, right? Because considering the business user tools, we may end up sometimes at least 3 or 4 variations again, right?
Right.
And also for the date of birth picker we have just used, considering the users are new to the technology, will there be occasions where one label will not be sufficient? Like for date, for day, I should be adding sub labels like day, month, and year.
Mm-hmm. So possibly, yes. So that is also a design pattern. That is, and there are many design patterns. So you are absolutely right. So on both points, you're absolutely right. So which is, I have just taken just 3 variables and I've created 317 variations. And I've showed you how to do out of that, right? But the point is practically the number of variations are much more.
Okay.
Right? So it is very, it is 100% guaranteed that you will get more than 2 possibilities.
Right.
Okay. So, but what you will also do is that is when you look at constraints, right? So this is when engineering might come in and say, this is more difficult, this is less difficult, or somebody else might come in and say, there is a, this is, I can market this or I cannot market this, right? So there are many other considerations that you will kind of apply when you're working in a practical environment that will still help you narrow down and get you to a reasonable decision. And again, in design, one thing I do want to say is there's no such thing as a bad decision. Okay, it is just you are making a design in a context, right? And so it has to work within that context and you're fine.
Okay, sure.
Cool. Okay, awesome. So let's see. So Sanjeev is asking an interesting question, which I'm still not understanding. The question is about social media. When we post a post on social media, why it will not charge money? Let us say that I'm not understanding, Sanjeev, genuinely. I do not know. If company charges, they won't be a user. Why would? Oh, I'm remembering the question, which is like, why don't companies charge you for, why don't you charge customers for reading posts? I think that was the discussion that we had a long time ago. And I think it's probably the same answer. So I don't have a better answer. I'm sorry, Sanjeev. Any book recommendation to learn UX? So we will give you these recommendations towards the end of the workshop. All these recommendations will be put out together, their websites, their resources that we have put in. And just not that, if you literally go into the courses that we have curated, the free course that Saurabh put up for you, you will have related content available for you. Okay. So, so Anshul says, great. So you're obsessed. That's awesome. So this is really good. So let's go on to the next slide. So thank you very much, Anshul. Your appreciation means a lot because that's where the value is. And so this is what it is. For those of you that have just registered for day one, I'd encourage you come join us, because for me, you know, it's you become a member and then we do this on a monthly basis. We have these talks and we also have these discussions that go on pretty much on a weekly basis. We bring in guests and all that stuff. So you know, this is really good for people who want to build careers. And usually, you know, we have a very eclectic group of people with experience, people without experience, but majority of the folks are people with experience. So there's also a huge support, community support kind of an equation that comes in here as well. So there's the college membership link is up there. So go ahead and click on it and register for it if you want to start joining from tomorrow onwards. Let's go on to the next slide. And this brings us to the homework. Okay. So number one is you need to join the Discord channel. For those of you that have not joined the Discord channel, strongly encourage you to join the Discord channel, because that's where all the conversations happen. And then we will upload, identify as many variations of radio buttons as you can find on the internet. Okay. And what I want you to do is get the screenshot. Okay. And tell me what is, you know, here's how you do radio buttons. Mention in what case you would use that radio button. Okay. And if possible, identify the possible states for that radio button. Okay. And once you do that, and also comment on other people's posts as well, so you can have a discussion going, and that also is just an icebreaker, so you can introduce yourself to each other. Okay, and this assignment will be posted on Discord as well. So can we just quickly post out the Discord link? Yes. So Discord link is in the chat box, so you can go ahead and click on it, and then we can, you know, do it. The deadline tomorrow is 4 p.m. so that we get a chance to review it, and then I'll, you know, we'll start the class after that. Okay. Any questions or thoughts? So let me see if I missed anything. So Saurabh, is there any questions or thoughts on the LinkedIn side?
No, Prasad.
Awesome. So either if people don't have any questions, either the concept was such a bouncer that it went over the head, or I was such an awesome teacher that everything came in. I have no idea which one is going to happen. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a great day, and see you tomorrow. Chalo. Bye-bye.